Hey, everybody. Welcome to a paranormal pop-up here on True Crime Paranormal. I call this a paranormal pop-up because this is not about crime at all, but it is definitely about the paranormal and about, well, I titled this um Stargate, Monroe, and I don't know, something. Anyway, this is about I'm going to talk today about what you might know or might not know as the gateway process or the gateway experience. So this was some experimentation that the CIA did back in the 1980s that had to do with astral projection, and a lot of the CIA files around this particular issue have been released either prior to this or this year. So there's a lot of, and some of it's still redacted, but there's really a lot of very interesting information here. And it applies very much to some of the work that I'm doing right now. And when I read one of these articles, I had one of those lightning strike moments. I don't know if you have ever had one of those, but um, that it all has to do with binaural beats. And you know, if you watch the show regularly, that I've been doing some work with fractals and binaural beats. And if you follow me over on TikTok or on Clapper or Instagram, you will see that I am sharing all kinds of binaural beats stuff. I'm mixing fractal videos and binaural beats. So anyway, the reason I wanted to share this with you, for one, because it is paranormal, it's very interesting, but it also, the timing of it is just stunning for me. So I'm going to explain what all this is in case you don't know. So this all has to do a lot with, first of all, as far as the CIA and the government are concerned, there was concern in the 80s that the Russians were developing psychics, people with ESP and telekinetic abilities and the ability to astral project and spy on us. Like there was a lot going on. And we do know now that that is true, that there was some research like that going on. And so the US was like, well, we have to get in on this too, even though there was a lot of question about, is this legit or not? And this was a project that went on for a long time, most commonly called Stargate. But it kind of started back before that. And it started back in the 50s with a man named Robert Monroe. So Robert Monroe he owned radio stations, and he liked to produce different kinds of sounds and vibrations and with different frequencies and stuff, because he liked to see how they impacted people. Like, we know that sounds affect us, right? Hearing something is one way to change how you feel very quickly. You know, it can make you alert, it can make you sleepy, or it can expand your state of consciousness, as we know. If you've done any kind of meditation, if you have any particular music you're really drawn to, you know that sounds change your consciousness, right? So Robert Monroe was all through the 50s, he was really researching this in the 50s and the 60s. And so in the 70s is when the first report comes out that the US military and the intelligence community are worried about the Soviet Union using ESP and stuff to spy on the US. So in 1975, Robert Monroe registered a patent about an audio technique that was designed to stimulate brain function that made the left and the right hemispheres of the brain become synchronized. We will know this as binaural beats. He called the state hemispheric synchronization, or HemiSync. And you might be familiar with HemiSync, because if you go to Spotify, for example, you can actually listen to some HemiSync tracks, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But he was basically saying that, hey, these can create altered states of consciousness. So from 1978 to 1984, there was a man named Joseph McMonigle who was a remote viewer for the CIA, and he contributed to 450 remote viewing missions. He worked under what is now known as Project Stargate. He was known as Remote View Number One. And there's a huge long story about him that I'm not going to get into because, you can look him up, but there's some really interesting stuff that went on about that. So basically what was going on is CIA found people who kind of had a natural ability to do this, right? And then they started saying, okay, but wait a minute, can people be taught to remote view? And that's when a report was written this was in June of 1983, a report called Analysis and Assessment of the Gateway Process. So this is a scientific framework for understanding how to expand human consciousness, how to create out-of-body experiences, an altered state of minds in order to do remote viewing. And I mean, you can look up the remote viewing stuff online about the Stargate project. It's crazy, you guys. So what would happen is a remote viewer would review a place, and then they would draw what they found, draw what it looked like, where they would be given like coordinates. Most of the time they're given GPS coordinates. And then they would draw what they saw in that place. And it could get down to details of even what was written in reports inside buildings. It was wild. So throughout this entire time, nobody's been really sure exactly what the gateway process was. Like, what were they actually doing to make this happen, right? And so that's where Robert Monroe comes in. Because the gateway process, the report was actually written by Lieutenant Colonel Wayne McDonnell. And there's not a lot known about him, but he's the one who actually wrote the report. So basically, here's what their intent was. This is what they wanted to do with this gateway process. They called it, they said that this was various scientific avenues that he wanted to take that included a biomedical inquiry to understand the physical aspects of the process. What was happening to people physically when they were remote viewing? Information on quantum mechanics to describe the nature and functioning of human consciousness. How does this work? Theoretical physics to explain the time-space dimension and means by which expanded human consciousness transcends it. How do we transcend our physical bodies to remote view? Classical physics to bring the whole phenomenon of out-of-body states into the language of physical science and remove the stigma of an occult connotation. So there were some problems with that because although remote viewing worked, and actually the Stargate project was very successful in what it did, along with other remote viewers that found missing people, solved crimes, those kinds of things, they couldn't do the part that this dignitary wanted, basically, that Lieutenant Colonel Wayne McDonnell. He wanted them to explain why this works because he didn't feel, and the government didn't feel, that they could trust this process if they didn't understand how it works, right? Here's the problem. We can't explain how it works. We can't explain why it works. We don't know. We only know that it can and does, right? I'm curious. We've got a few people in the chat. Let us know if you've ever had a lucid dream, if you ever feel like you've astral projected at night, like you feel like you went somewhere, can you astral project? I can astral project to my own house. I can astral project when I'm traveling to check on my pets. And I trained myself to do this over a long period of time. I can check in on my house. It's taken a lot of practice and a lot of meditation. So here are some of the steps that they took to explain why this happens, and maybe to figure out why you can trigger it in people. So they started with hypnosis, and then they moved on to transcendental meditation. Also, they used biofeedback. But what they really landed on was binaural beats. So I'm going to try to explain what binaural beats are in a easy way to understand it. Of course, Monroe was calling this HemiSync, or hemispheric synchronization. So that means syncing up both sides of your brain to be working on or focusing on or experiencing the same thing at the same time. And so here's what binaural beats are. You take a frequency. Say you take a frequency that is 100 hertz, a sound that is 100 hertz, and you add to it a sound that is 300 hertz. When you hear them together, your brain perceives some other sounds. So the one that is the most important is the difference between the two. So the difference between 300 and 100 is 200 hertz. It sounds like a beat. It's an oscillation that we hear. It's not a real sound at all. It is what our brains perceive when those two frequencies are played together. We aren't actually hearing it. Our brain waves are experiencing it in a way. I don't know what your familiarity is with binaural beats, other than what I have shared here on True Crime Paranormal. I've shared it a little bit, but there are different states of consciousness that can be developed with this process. So the audio, you have to listen to it, and you'll see if you go over to any of my social media to the videos that I make, you have to wear headphones, because you're actually hearing one frequency in each ear in order to make the beat. And so if you listen to it out loud, it might sound like a nice meditation music, but you're not hearing the beat. You're not experiencing the beat. And the purpose of the beat, and this is something that I had to talk about this because this feels so very validating for me as a healer and a psychic and all of the work that I do. It's all about entrainment. And you've heard me use that word before, probably. And entrainment is taking a static frequency, a frequency that stays the same, and taking an oscillating frequency like we are, or like our brainwaves are, and introducing the static frequency to the oscillating frequency, and then the oscillating frequency lines up with the static frequency. I've talked about it with binaural beats. I've talked about it with crystal healing is a similar concept. So this was just really, really powerful to me to read how this was all explained, and to see that that's actually how they were teaching people with the gateway experience to astral project, and to have psychic experiences, was to use this process to sync up both sides of your brain and to entrain to a certain frequency. So different, there's the delta wave and the alpha wave, the beta wave, those kinds of different waves. Those are different brain waves, right? And you can sync your brain up, both hemispheres at the same time, to one of those frequencies. And then you get into a particular state in which you may be able to perceive an out-of-body experience. You might be able to astral project. You might have some other spiritual experience. You might also have, if you're seeking out a particular answer, you might have a very strong psychic experience while using this particular bit of technology. So this is just really, really important. So here's exactly what the gateway process does to the body. So when you do the gateway process and you're using binaural beats, and a lot of times what they're doing is they're like using a 100 hertz with a 104 hertz. So they're getting you to a 4 hertz state. That's a delta, I believe. Anyway, look them up. You'll see it. But here's what happens. First, you feel an induced state of calm. Your blood pressure lowers. Your circulatory system, skeletal, and other organ systems begin to vibrate at the same rate. So increased resonance is achieved within your body. If you're using like a 4 hertz, the resulting sound wave matches the electrostatic field of the earth. So you start to sync up not just within yourself and your brain, but with the earth. The body and earth and other similarly tuned minds become a single energy continuum. Guess what? It turns out we're all connected. It turns out when we get to that state, you can find any information you want. So this is obviously a very simple description of all of this. And I'm going to share some articles and some information in the description of this show so that you can see it, because it's hard to put it all into words. But I have to say it's a tremendously validating experience for me, because I've been working with vibrations and frequency and entrainment and binaural beats and all of this for many years as a healer. And to read what they were doing back in the 70s and 80s, unfortunately, this project got scrapped and so much of this information has been hidden. But this is really important information, particularly because it legitimizes it. These were scientific studies. These were not studies of the occult. They were scientific quantum physics studies. All of the guys that ran these studies were physicists. Sorry, can't think of the word. They were physicists and they were studying this. Now, they say that it failed, but the reason they say it failed is because they can't explain why. They did 100% prove that this is possible, that being a psychic is possible, that astral projection is possible, that learning to use the vibrations and the energies around us to heal and to balance and, all of the things that if you're already a metaphysical person, this has been proven to actually be true. We don't know why, because, we're still learning, right? I mean, quantum physics is a pretty young field, but that's really what this all is. But this was so powerful to me. It really, really, it just means a lot to me because it validates the work that I've been doing for, what I consider to be my life's work. And so I wanted to share that with all of you. I want to invite you. I'm Eclectic Healer, and I'm on TikTok. I'm on Clapper, and I'm Eclectic Healer 75 on Instagram. Please come follow me on one or all of those places, because I am sharing all kinds of mini binaural beats meditations to heal various issues. I just did one tonight for sleep it's called Rest, and it has I have added fractal art into it because I'm a fractal artist, and I really believe in the energy of those figures. and adding that into binaural beats. And that's something I'm practicing, but I want to share that with as many of you as I can. So go find me, Eclectic Healer, over on TikTok and Clapper, and Eclectic Healer 75 on Instagram, because I want you to experience this. And I will share in the show notes the articles and information where I got all of this, because it's way more complicated and longer than this. But this is just the gist of it. But it's super important. If you have psychic experiences, if you've had any kind of an intuitive experience or a psychic experience in your life, and you've ever been questioned about whether that's even really a thing, guys, the CIA proved that it is. And we now have their evidence. So I just wanted to share that with you because I feel like it's really powerful and something that is definitely related to what we do here at True Crime Paranormal. So I just wanted to share that with you all tonight. Thank you for joining me for the pop-up, and be sure to check out the show notes for the articles that I will share there, as far as the sources for tonight's show, because it's a lot of information, way more than I could share tonight, and I want to make sure you get to see it all. And come see me on social. Come find Eclectic Healer. I've got lots of fun stuff going on. So thanks so much for joining me. You know it. I'm Christy Brower, and this is True Crime Paranormal with the Psychic Sisters. Thanks for joining me.